Let's look at another way of formulating the min-cost network flow problem. We'll start by looking at the way we first formulated it. We had a decision variable for flow on AB and a decision variable for flow on AC, etc. And we listed them out in a row like that, one column for each road. And then we had capacity values, limits on each of those. And we had a flow cost on each of them. So we said, here's how much flow each road is getting and how much that costs per unit. So that was our objective function. And then we had this flow balance matrix where we said, like, at B, inflow from AB minus the outflow that's BC and BD has to equal 0. And then the same thing for C, inflow from AC plus inflow from BC minus outflow from CD or on CD has to total up to 0. And then we also had at A, things flowing out of A, like AB and AC, the total flow on that has to be multiplied by -1, gives us -10, and then flow into D gives us +10. And it feels a little weird to do this, but then we had that nice pattern that every column was a road, and it had a +1 for the node that it was inflow to, and a -1 for what it was outflow from. And then all the other entries in that column were 0. And that's a node arc matrix. Each row represents a node. Here they aren't in alphabetical order, but that's fine. And each column represents an arc or a link. So that's the basic setup. Let's go do a node-node matrix formulation. So the same setup as before, but now we want to have a matrix that says how much flow is coming from a node to another node. So we'll set it up this way. I'm going to skip this column for now and come back to it. So from A, B, C, D, and then to A, B, C, D. And so we'll designate this whole block of nodes, of cells, as decision variables. So if I said put, let's say, 6 from A to B, that would mean that AB was 6. So I don't really have to put that here. So think about this idea for a sec. How am I going to enforce the constraints, the flow balance constraints? Something about inflow and outflow. Let me suggest something here. Let me say take the sum of this column, and similarly for these other columns, and take the sum of this row, and similarly for the other rows. So these are row sums. Would you say they are inflow? Like, is this inflow to A or outflow? Well, it says from A, so that sounds like outflow. And these are column sums, which would logically then be inflows. These are things going to A, right? We can put the word to here. We don't have to do from on the rows and to on the columns. Other people might do it differently, so it's important to check each time you're analyzing a model, which way did the person lay out the model. So then how will we say that the inflow equals the outflow at B and C? And how will we say that the outflow from A is 10 and the inflow to D is 10? Well, like in the node arc matrix, we ended up doing inflow minus outflow was 0 in some cases. So it'll be handy to do outflow right next to inflows. So it's nice to get these values over here. And I could just go like equals this one and so forth. But that would be a pain if I had a bunch of them. So let me show you a fun little trick here. You don't have to know this, but it's nice. So these are copied. I'm going to say, I'm going to put the numbers 1, 2, 3, and 4 here. And then I'll say equals index and highlight these and lock that reference. So index will look at a block of cells you give it, and you can tell it, read down this many rows and over this many columns and give me that answer. So I'm just using this little block here. What's the row number I want? Just row number 1. And which column number do I want? 1, 2, 3, or 4? That's just this. And so I'll paste that there. And so now if I put a 6, for example, here, The row sum is 6, obviously. The column sum is 6. That's the column sum for B, and so it ends up here on the B row. So we don't really need a 6 there. And then we'll say inflow minus outflow. And the column sums are the inflows, the row sums are the outflows. Yeah, let's wrap that. And then paste that down. And then inflow minus outflow has to be, let's try that again. Well, for B and C, inflow out minus outflow has to be 0. For A, if I had, let's say, 6 units leaving A, that's going to show up as a minus 6 here, and I know totally I need 10 units leaving A, so I'd have a minus 10 there. And then flowing into D, I need a plus 10. All right, so that's our flow balance constraints. We can color these. These are left-hand sides, so I'll color them lavender. These are right-hand sides, so I'll color them rose. Now let's think about the other stuff that's going on. We had these dollar amounts, and here I've laid them out in node-node format. And we had the road capacity limits. Again, I've laid them out in node-node format. I've just got a copy of the table here. What can I do with these that I still need to do for my linear program? Pause the video if you need to, think about it. I'd say these are related to objective function values. So we could say, here's our objective function. Minimize total cost. So how can I take these dollar amounts and apply them to these flow amounts? Turns out some product comes to our rescue again. We can say multiply the flow amounts by the dollar amounts. And that's dollar amount, so I'll give it $ formatting. And we'll color it orange. And then the rest of these are related to objective function stuff, so I might color them kind of off-color orange. But think about what this is saying. This is saying flow from A to D is free. I mean, if there's a 0 there, if there's a blank, that often counts as a 0. So if I just put 10 units of flow from A to D, that seems to satisfy my constraints and cost me $0. So that's a nice solution, but there isn't actually a road from A to D. So think about how I can tell Solver not to do that. All right, maybe you're back from pausing and thinking about it. One way you could do it is put a huge dollar amount here, like however many million, billion, trillion dollars that is, but that would be unfriendly in terms of round-off error, and we don't want to have to guess how big a number we need to put there. So I would not actually recommend doing that. A better way to do it is to say, well, you know, I still need to do my road capacities, and I've got them entered here, but can I just say that flow from A to D, the road capacity for that is 0? And then similarly put a 0 in all these other places that are roads that don't actually exist, and then we'll just say, well, those are now limited to 0. So time to do Solver, I think. Let's start up Solver. It has something here that I entered before, but it might not be right now, so let's be careful about it. So I want to minimize that by changing these cells. And let's just be safe and delete those. So then I want to say my inflow minus outflow has to be equal to those source sink amounts. And my decision variables have to be less than or equal to the road capacities, and that's where I'm shutting down roads that don't really exist. And I think that's good. Simplex LP, non-negativity, let solve. It says Solver found a solution, all constraints and optimality conditions are satisfied. And we get the same answer we got over here, 5 on AB, 5 on AC, 5 BD, 5 CD, but now it's laid out a little differently, isn't it? All right, so that's the node-node matrix formulation. Let's think back to another problem we saw, the assigning volunteers to time slots based on their preferences. Doesn't that kind of feel like a node-node matrix? Except now the nodes, the things listed here are not the same as the things listed here. So maybe we have 8 nodes. So try drawing that as a network flow diagram. Try sketching it out right now. Pause the video and come back when you can. Okay, welcome back from pausing. So here's a way to diagram it as a network flow diagram. We have one node for each person here, one node for each time slot here, and assigning a person to a time slot would be like entering something on this row in that column, and that would be like flow from this person to that person, from this person to that time slot. And before we said 1 unit of flow, or we said 1 means the person is assigned, so we would call that 1 unit of flow. So here I'm saying total we have 4 units of flow, 1 goes to each person, 1 flow goes from a person to a time slot, and then they all get collected here. So what would we say are the capacity limits and costs on these arrows, and these arrows? Take a sec to think about that. Well, here I wouldn't charge us anything for flow from the source to each person, because there we aren't involving the preferences. So I'd say $0 and a limit of exactly 1. 1 unit of flow goes to 1 person. And then the same thing for these. So that's the same for all those arrows and all those arrows. And then over here, just put the preference cost is the preference, and less than or equal to 1 unit of flow. So the assignment problem is really a network flow problem in disguise. If you remember, when we solved the assignment problem, we didn't enforce the binary constraint, but we got binary answers anyway. And it turns out that's a general property of network flow problems, as long as the capacities aren't non-integer, and the source and sink amounts. And we'll talk later in the class why that's a general property of network flow problems.